in the National-led government.
Question number 4, Jacqui Dean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Corrections and asks, what recent announcements has she made about reducing reoffending?
The Honourable Tolley.
Yesterday, the Associate Minister of Corrections and I announced that Budget 2012 will contribute to a 25% reduction in reoffending by 2017 and 18,500 fewer victims of crime every year from 2017. The moves are part of the Prime Minister's expectations for a more efficient and results-driven public service. This new focus on reducing reoffending will result in 33,000 additional offenders receiving new and expanded drug and alcohol treatment in prisons and in the community, an increase of almost 500%. Alongside increased education, skills training and employment programs for prisoners, including remand prisoners, it will lead to safer communities.
Jacqui Dean.
To the Minister, what specific investments is the Government making in Budget 2012 to reduce reoffending?
The Honourable Tolley.
Mr Speaker, reprioritised funding of $65 million in operating expenditure over the next 4 years will contribute to 7,855 additional prisoners and community offenders receiving new and expanded rehabilitation services, 2,950 additional prisoners in education and employment training, 41,000 community offenders receiving new rehabilitation support provided directly by probation officers, and 6,000 prisoners and community-based offenders accessing new reintegration support programs from iwi and community groups.
Jacqui Dean.
To the Minister, how is the Government planning on increasing employment opportunities for prisoners upon release?
The Honourable Tolley.
Mr Speaker, as part of our increased focus on reducing reoffending, we will be increasing support provided to prisoners on release and working with employers, industry groups and Work and Income to highlight and promote prison training. Some of this work is already underway, and a recent open day at Spring Hill Prison attracted huge interest, including a number of large employers like Fletcher Construction, Spotless and Turners and Growers. Another key focus will be targeting training in areas where there are likely to be skills gaps, and in fact we've started this in Christchurch already with extra trade training so that prisoners can help fill the demand for labour as we rebuild Christchurch. And the 90-day trial for workers is also important in helping prisoners find work so that industry can take a chance on a released prisoner.
Supplementary.
Taurua Flavel.
Mr Speaker, kia ora tātou to the Minister. Does she agree with Kim Workman of Rethinking Crime and Punishment that the recent Budget 2012 changes announced by the Minister and the Associate Minister for Corrections, the Honourable Dr Peter Sharples, are, quote, highly ambitious and represent a major shift in the way corrections has conducted its business over the last 2 decades, end of quote, and how will the changes help cut the reoffending rate of Māori?
The Honourable Tolley.
Mr Speaker, yes, I am. And I'm confident that with the support of our coalition partners, the Associate Minister with the Maori Party, these new initiatives will make a significant difference for Maori. In fact, the drug treatment program that's currently offered that we're looking to expand has been most effective with our Maori offenders. So thank the Associate Minister for his support.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I know it's a breach of standing orders to draw attention of the House to the fact that ministers are reading speeches, but reading answers to supplementaries from another party.
No, the member should not do that, and he knows he shouldn't do that. Question number 5, Dr Russel Norman.
Point of order.
Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This is a point of order about a transfer of a question, and I know that this is a difficult issue, but I'd ask you just to indulge me. This is about the Speaker's ruling 1516 by Hunt, where the Speaker made a ruling that you shouldn't be transferring a question where only one minister could be expected to have personal knowledge of the subject. 1516, and your own ruling at 1521 is of a similar kind of nature. And this question was specifically, when it was lodged, it was about, does the Prime Minister stand by his statement that he is much more of a mind, blah, 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 blah. Now, so the issue, the subject... Yeah, well, that's right. The subject matter is the mind of the Prime Minister. The subject matter in this instance is what is in the mind of the Prime Minister. That is specifically what the question is about. There is no other minister that could be expected to have personal knowledge of the Prime Minister's mind. Only the Prime Minister can be expected to have personal knowledge of his own mind, and that is exactly what is in the nature of the question.
Order. Order. Can I remind members, please, that points of order are meant to be heard in silence, and the member at least referred to some relevant Speaker's rulings in making his point of order. Had the member asked simply, in the case of the question of the Prime Minister, does the Prime Minister stand by his statement with regard to asset sales, etc., and stop the question, there might have been some merit in the member's point. But then he went on to ask another question. If so, has he seen Treasury's advice that asset sales? Then he's getting into the responsibility of the Minister of Finance. And the government's perfectly at liberty to, where there's split responsibilities for a question being asked, to transfer a question. There's no way one can argue that this question could solely be answered by the Prime Minister. You know, the Minister of Finance would have more information with respect to Treasury's advice. And so, had the member wanted to pin it on the Prime Minister, got to be careful how one constructs the question. And we're seeing too much at the moment of too much being put into one question, which allows questions to be transferred, gives ministers scope in answering in a way members don't particularly want to hear. And there's a classic example, I think. If the member wants the Prime Minister to answer a question, got to be very careful how that question's constructed.
Well, speaking to the point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Dr. Russel.
I just cannot see how the Minister of Finance, as well briefed as I'm sure he is, can tell me what is in the mind of the Prime Minister when that is specifically what the question is about. Nobody else has personal knowledge in the way that the Prime Minister does of the Prime Minister's mind.
And that's order, order, order. And that's why I say if the member had stopped his question at that point, I think he would have had a greater case. But he didn't. He went on to ask about Treasury advice. That's the responsibility of the Minister of Finance.
Speaking to the point of order.
Speaking to the point of order, Kevin Haig.
The question does go on to a second leg, sir, but the second leg is, has he seen the advice? And if the Prime Minister has not seen the advice, he can simply say no to that part. It doesn't require the specialist knowledge of the Minister of Finance to be able to respond to that second part of the question, whereas it does require the specialist knowledge of the Prime Minister to be able to respond to the first part.
I simply repeat what I've said. The remedies in members' hands. Don't put too much into questions. You know, this question didn't need that second part, because the problem is with the second part, the Prime Minister can if that's stated with the Prime Minister, can simply say Treasury advice, not my responsibility. And one presumes the focus of the question was actually on the second part, that was actually, one presumes that is the more important part of the question, because that is the one that, because whether one stands by a previous statement is hardly a hugely difficult question. It's probably one of the weakest questions a person could be asked, because it's just asking an opinion. And whereas the substance of the question is about Treasury advice. And so the remedy's in members' hands. You know, construct questions carefully if they don't want them transferred, but don't go into another minister's patch. Order! Thank you. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
The real question that perhaps your office and even yourself, with respect, might have answered is, why would the Prime Minister transfer that question? It asks him. It asks him.
No,
right?
Order. That's not a point of order at all. Nothing. No order. Now listen. This has gone on. Order. That is not a point of order at all. As the member knows, because he's been a member of several governments, he knows that... Order. He knows that governments transfer questions, and he's well aware of that. And so there's nothing unusual about that. and members know how to construct questions to make sure they're not transferred. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor.
Mr Speaker, this raises a matter which I have discussed on a number of occasions with the Clerk's office, and that is the changing of the sense of the question and the transfer. If Mr Speaker, when it is transferred, and I accept that it is the right of the Prime Minister to transfer it, it should have actually in the end said, if so, has the Prime Minister seen the Treasury advice? Because that was the essence of the question. It's reflected in the first part, but it's not reflected in the second part, and it should have been.
I hear the member's point, and it's an interesting point the member raises, that in the transferal of a question to maintain that sense is an important issue, and I note the point the member makes. Question number 5.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Dr. Russel.
I seek leave to transfer the question back to the Prime Minister.
Leave is sought for the question to be transferred back to the Prime Minister. Is there any objection to that course of action? There is objection. Question order. No, there will not be.
Chicken. Right.
Order. The House will come to order immediately. Immediately. The member's just lost question 5. Question number 6, the Honourable David Parker. Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
I seek leave to ask question number 5 from the House.
Leave is sought to have question number 5 reinstated to the member. Is there any objection to that course of action? There is objection. Question number 6, the Honourable David Parker.